Now I was sent to the ordination retreat at Ditchingham, where I met with the 6 other new curates to be ordained deacon in the Norwich diocese. 4 of us had attended open evangelical colleges. The other 3 came from liberal, Anglo-Catholic and conservative evangelical colleges. This breadth of Christian faith demonstrates the strength of the Anglican Church in its search for truth, found by holding together Bible, tradition and logic. At the end of the 3-day retreat, we were taken to the cathedral for a very memorable and moving service. "36 relatives and friends attended the ordination service and came back to Lowen Lodge for a party afterwards. In the evening there was a service of welcome at Surlingham Church, followed by a garden buffet. The next day we visited Mum and Dad at Reedham, where they were staying in a cottage. Jan and I held an open house at Lowen Lodge for parishioners, and 50 people came along. We were both invited to Bishop Peter's house for a newcomers' garden party, and I began post-ordination training led by Michael Stagg and Philip McFadgen. Friends of Paul and Catherine, Craig, James and Laura visited. We went to the north coast and explored the dunes and swam across rivers and in the sea. Paul restored an old bicycle and began a paper round. Unfortunately, the man with the van backed over Paul's bicycle when bringing newspapers to him. Fortunately, we were able to claim on our insurance policy, and Paul bought a brand new bike. Work now started on the house. Electricians, plumbers, builders, painters and carpenters appeared. Internal walls were demolished, and gradually the kitchen took on a new shape. Jan and I were invited out for many meals with our new parishioners. Then we went to Basingstoke for Mum and Dad's 40th wedding anniversary and met our new nephews, Robert and Charles. I called a music practice for the first evening praise service, and 13 people came along. On the first night, Rockland Church was packed, but afterwards I heard a number of complaints. For some it was too long. Some didn't like the songs. Hilda Thompson complained that it had been the same night as our choir practice, and that choir members had gone to evening praise instead. However, others enjoyed it, and at the next one in Bramerton Church there were 70 in the congregation. Went to Thetford Forest and brought Bertie back. The cats weren't terribly amused, and Bertie howled through an evening praise practice. The snow fell and motoring became difficult. Some church services had to be cancelled, but Bertie loved the snow. The heating system stopped working, so we called the maintenance engineer out and were given a £40 bill for him to tell us that we'd run out of oil. We bought Bertie a kennel from Loddon, and Jan had to do some retraining when she found that he was tearing clothing off the washing line. Jan formed a music group in Surlingham, and I started a confirmation class comprising 6 young people, including Paul. Claxton PCC decided to have a stewardship campaign, and at the meal the drama group comprising Leslie and Paul O'Connor, Peter Eagling, Helen Fisher and I enacted a story that we had written together called The Cocky Ollybirds, based on the parable of the talents. Candy became an overnight celebrity in South Yorkshire after passing the audition for the play Run for Your Wife at the Library Theatre in Sheffield. She returned after each performance in the back seat of the car, very much the prima donna. At the Surlingham annual church meeting, Pat and Philip Pearce tried to shock everyone with their sudden resignation as church wardens. Apparently they didn't like children being so out of control in the evening praise services, and the fact that I had moved a choir pew temporarily to accommodate the music group was just the last straw. Fortunately, the wind was taken out of their sails when Pippa Thurlow and Sally Barham immediately volunteered to step into their shoes. The Sunday special services for families began at Surlingham Church. For this we got together a team of group leaders, musicians, dramatists and helpers. It ran for a whole year, and at the end we all had a party. Paul and Catherine persuaded us, against our better judgment, to allow them to hold a party at Lowen Lodge, also insisting that we should not be there. We returned at 8:15 p.m. to find teenagers everywhere, in the road and in our neighbours' gardens. Although this was before the era of social media, word had quickly got round and many uninvited characters had turned up. Food, drink, cigarette burns on a carpets and settee. A fire alarm, coaxial cable and back door knob and our supply of chocolate biscuits had all been taken. Someone had removed the toilet water pipe, so that after the next flush there was water everywhere. Someone else had climbed on the roof and broke the guttering, and we found the fence broken in 2 places. The Lowen Lodge sign had been uprooted, and our 2 canoes had been placed in the middle of the road. Paul and Catherine were obviously quite shocked and realised why we had been hesitant. As well as supply teaching in a variety of schools, Jan concentrated more of her time in property development and management. She also began training with the Norwich Samaritans, which seemed unnecessary as she was a deputy director in the Isle of Man branch. Most days began with a cycle ride from Surlingham to Rockland, where I would join my incumbent, John Ledwood, for morning prayer. Each week we met up with the clergy and readers of the Bramerton group of 11 parishes, and monthly with the Loddon Deanery chapter. Surlingham became my particular responsibility, and I set out to visit all of the parishioners, meeting so many interesting people and hearing a wide variety of stories. I received this letter from the Bishop of Norwich. Dear Chris, whenever I receive a letter of complaint about a clergyman from a parishioner, I show it to the person concerned in order that there should be openness between us. By the nature of things, satisfied customers rarely write, and so I get few letters complimenting a priest. But I was very delighted to receive this one this morning about you from Mr. Dawson, and I enclose a copy for your information. It was heartwarming and good of him to write. Well done. Enclosed was this letter. My Lord Bishop, I am writing in appreciation of the Christian kindness of the Reverend Chris Whiteman, who is the curate resident in our village. My wife has been seriously ill over the last 12 months, and Mr. Whiteman has visited her at least once a month during this time, and has considerably bolstered her morale, and has helped to restore her faith, which was badly shaken. Thank you for appointing a pastor who has humour without a cheapening of his beliefs, faith without narrow-mindedness, and enthusiasm without proselytizing. Joe Dawson. I had started to regularly visit Stella Dawson, who suffered from depression. As a child, she was sent on a passenger ship during the Second World War to Canada. However, the ship was torpedoed by a German submarine, and she was rescued and returned to England. Her mother, believing in the principle of getting straight back on a horse after falling off, arranged for her daughter to take another ship to Canada. After the war, she returned home and became a very accomplished equestrian and yachtswoman, remaining very active throughout her life. That was until the day her mother died, and suddenly she found it difficult even to leave the house. In the autumn half-term, with Catherine and Paul's friends, John Kerr and Emma Gant, we hired a longboat at March for a trip along the River Nene. On a Norfolk Church's cycle ride, I visited 13 places of worship. John Ledwood started a house group, which he called Focus 4. I organised a week-long benefice trip to Spring Harvest at Butlins. John Wimber was there, and a substantial group of conservative evangelicals walked out in protest. The alternative comedy was very good, with their portrayals of a trendy vicar, a boring canon, and a Graham Kendrick look-alike. We also attended some seminars, played table tennis, and swam. Catherine and Emma tried canoeing, but they managed to capsize both canoes in Ellis's Staithe. They arrived home soaking wet, and I had to walk across the fields to find, retrieve, empty and then paddle back the abandoned canoes, negotiating my way through the Surlingham regatta that was taking place at that time. Catherine dyed her hair white and Paul dyed his black. Catherine's current phrase was, "You wouldn't let it lie." Paul was put off the bus from Norwich for offering only a half fare. He gave the driver an uncomplimentary sign and began to walk home. Later the driver stopped the bus outside Lowen Lodge and told us what had happened. This event, involving the curate's son, provided entertainment and a story to be told for a number of people from the village who were on the bus at the time. Anyway, Paul apologised to the driver and they got on well after that. We turned our front room into a French cafe for the Surlingham Progressive Supper. The PCC then organised a graveyard clear-up, and a team of 15 volunteers set about cutting and piling up the long grass. There was a good atmosphere, and Pippa Thurlow, the church warden, organised a buffet lunch for us. Pippa then began work on a parish map made of fabric. Jan was asked to sew Lowen Lodge onto it.